Hi everyone, Jesse here with eTrailer. Today we'll be taking a look at DeeMaxx Disc Brakes. We actually have DeeMaxx in the house doing some training today, so we'll be talking with Brandon. He'll explain into detail about why you might want to make the switch to disc brakes. So Brandon, why would somebody be looking to upgrade to disc brakes?
Yeah, number one reason we have seen, and we try to get the word out there about switching over to disc brakes, is safety. Safety of your family that's in the tow vehicle, safety of your home. A lot of people are full-time in RVs these days, so safety of your home essentially. People that are even not living it full-time, traveling around. I mean, these things are not cheap. Safety is a huge ordeal, and when we're talking about 1960s technology of drum brakes to disc brakes and the technological advancements we've made today, it just seems pretty obvious to me why the safety concerns are there.
Why would somebody go with DeeMaxx over some of the other brands?
Yeah, so there's several disc brake manufacturers out there. A couple of the big advantages with going with DeeMaxx. Biggest is we're the #1 disc brake manufacturer for the U.S. military across all the branches. So if they're trusting us to pass their stringent tests, I would imagine that your average people like you and I can trust it as well. Some advantages specifically of our disc brakes to competitors' disc brakes is our patented design of the holes in the hat section of the rotor. There's really three big areas that helps. The first is the obvious, the heat dissipation. It's not like a closed system like a drum brake where the heat's being kind of contained in there. Second being water dissipation. So anyone that's either driving through some heavy rain, maybe back in a boat trailer down a ramp, our disc brakes our rotors having the hole in the hat helps that water to drain out, and the water's not sitting in there allowing rust to build up or corrode. And third is during the plating process. So our rotor here, this is a decrement coated or a max coated rotor, and that's a triple dipping process. So this rotor is completely submerged in the max coating, and it's dipped 3 times over. With the competition not having these holes in the hat, it forms an air pocket in there. And so the coating process is having to be redone and retouched several times. With ours, it's triple dipped and done. There's no air pockets, there's no patchy finish, everything is smooth and consistent.
Yeah, you can really tell you guys have a lot of experience, you've done your research. You also offer brakes for a wide range of trailers. How far does that range go?
Yeah, we offer, just about everything from 3,500 pound up to 16,000 pound axle capacities, even up to the 16,000 pound dual wheel guys. We cover all of that, and we cover everything with our actuators. Now we're looking at our brakes. Our actuators, we service the same thing, the single axle guys out to the triple axle.
So our neighbor today opted for these stainless steel calipers, but you guys also offer another style. So tell us a little bit more about both of those.
Yeah, so we offer really a couple different styles. We have the completely max system that's going to be max coated everything. And then if it's 3 to 6K caliper, it's going to have our ceramic pads. Anything 7K and up will be the Kevlar pads. With our calipers, we've also got a couple things that help us stand apart from the competition. Like I said, the max coating, and then we have a max stainless steel, where it's going to be max components here, max bracket, and then stainless steel caliper and all stainless steel components inside of it. A stainless steel piston, stainless steel dowel rods, pins at the back. That's just one of the things with the max stainless, and then obviously all stainless will be the same way. A couple things, like I said, on our caliper that are specific to us. On the back side of our caliper here, on the kind of the face of it, we've got laser engraved writing for the torque specs. We've got people all the time asking us for torque specs, so we've kind of gone the step ahead there and put them right there on the caliper for everybody. You don't have to worry about that. And then the bleeder design on the back of the caliper, kind of industry standard was not having them at 120 degrees like what we've got. We found that opening those up to 120 degrees is going to prevent them from breaking in shipping, breaking in travel, and just overall protect that system better and not compromise the bleeding of the brakes at all.
There's a lot of things that you guys have done just to make the installation process really easy. We actually got a whole DeeMaxx kit with the lines and the actuator, and just everything works pretty well together. And I feel like if you can do brakes on a car, you can get these installed on your trailer.
Yeah, absolutely. We try and make it as end-user friendly as possible. So,
thank you again, Brandon, for coming by and helping explain why somebody might want to make the switch to disc brakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having us out. Appreciate it.
As Brandon said, and I'll also just reiterate, safety is really your main concern when towing, and disc brakes are going to greatly improve your stopping ability. We've done tests here at eTrailer. There's been plenty of third parties doing testing, and they found that switching to disc brakes really substantially decreases your stopping distance, and that's the best way to keep you safe out there on the road. Another great advantage to switching to discs is that you can constantly be checking on the status of your pads. You can check your pad life and also how your rotors look by simply glancing through the wheel here. As you can see, I can see the pad life, at least on the outer pad. I would have to kind of crawl under there to be able to see the inside pad, but the rotor looks good also. Our neighbor was concerned about their brakes, but they just didn't have the ability or the tools or space to take everything apart, which is what you'll have to do with these drums. And just looking at these, you can tell there's a lot more moving parts. There's a lot more things that can go wrong. And this drum actually had a bad grease seal, meaning that there was grease getting spread all over the shoes and the drum itself. And this brake was probably not doing anything to help our neighbor come to a safe stop at all. There's a few things you'll need to know to make sure that you have the right kit for your rig. We've already talked about a couple of those, that being the axle capacity, and then where you're going to be using your rig so you can decide which material will be right for you. Another thing you'll need to know is the bolt pattern, which means the orientation and amount of studs that your hub has. You can most likely find that out from your manufacturer, or you can check out the product page. It'll have it laid out for you how to measure it out so you can find it out yourself. There are a few things that you'll need to purchase separately from the disc brakes, that being the brake lines and also an actuator. With these DeeMaxx brakes, you'll need an actuator that's capable of up to 1600 PSI. There's many options out there. We actually installed a full DeeMaxx kit. That means the lines are DeeMaxx and the actuator is, just because that's what our neighbor wanted to do. If you have any more questions about how to choose the right kit for your rig, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you get pointed in the right direction. This is a pretty big, important purchase, and you want to make sure that you get it right the first time. If you've already picked out the kit and you're just not comfortable installing it yourself, maybe you don't have the time, the space, or the tools to do so, feel free to check out our dealer locator to find someone local to you. That would be happy to help you get that installed. If you are watching this video to see how these get installed, then just follow along and I'll walk you through the process. We'll start our installation by removing our wheel. It's a 7/8 socket that you'll need, and you'll see I'm using a chrome socket. I know that's bad practice with an impact, but with the impact sockets, I always tend to scratch the wheels on these. So we'll get all these lug nuts broken loose. Once they're all loose, we'll just set the tire aside. One thing worth mentioning is we do have a tire sensor on our wheel here, so make sure you keep them in order or write the positions on them. Next, we'll take our grease cap off. So I'll just have a small pry bar, give it a couple taps with the hammer, and you can dig in underneath of it. Then we'll just work around it, prying up, popping it off. And behind that, it is pretty nasty and hard to see, but there is a cap. I'll clean this off with a rag so we can see what we're working on. So we'll need to pop off this plastic locking or metal locking cowler. You can usually just pry it out pretty easily. Set that aside because we will reuse it. And with our nut, you should be just hand tight. So you should just be able to spin it. Spin it counterclockwise until it comes off. Behind that is a washer that will also take off, or you can most likely just take the whole hub assembly off and then just make sure you collect that washer afterwards. Sometimes it's pretty tricky to slip out of here. If your hub is a little tighter than ours, then just give it a few taps with a hammer and it'll break loose. Ours is just sliding off, so we can take it off and set it aside. Now we have 5 9/16 inch nuts. We'll remove those. Now you should be able to pull the brake assembly off. Once again, if it's stuck, just tap it with a hammer. But behind it, we will have some wires, and we're not going to be using this wiring anymore, so we're just going to cut it back. Then what I'll do is tape off the end and push it back inside the axle. But for now, we'll take our drum assembly and set it aside. Now I've already learned from doing the brakes on the other axles that our studs here are too short for our caliper bracket. So I actually ordered some hardware separate from it. So I already banged this stud out, but we'll just take a hammer and tap each one off. It'll come off pretty easy. Now we'll clean all this old grease off the spindle. I sprayed some brake clean on it. Now we'll just clean it off with a rag. Then I'll come through with our grease gun and put grease into this circ fitting here until we have new grease coming out. Put our new hardware in for our caliper mounting bracket. I am putting blue thread locker on each bolt. That way I don't have to worry about them ever backing off. And we'll get our bracket in place. We're going to have where our caliper mounts on the back side. You want it as close to 9 o'clock as possible. Which, as you can see, it's not perfectly straight, but we're as close as we can get. And then each of those bolts will get a split washer and a nut, and then we'll tighten them down. Now we'll use that same 9/16 socket and a matching wrench and tighten these down in a star pad. Now we'll take our torque wrench and torque these down to the specifications in the instructions. Now we're ready to pack our bearings. We'll take our inner bearing, which is the larger one, and I like to have the hub assembly face down like this just because once I'm done packing it, I can put it right where it goes. But we're just going to get a good amount of grease, and you want to kind of get it to your palm, push firmly through, and we'll just keep doing that until you see it start to come out the other end, and then we'll rotate our bearing and continue on until the entire thing is packed full. Now once you have that nice and packed, we'll just take it and set it down inside of our hub. And since our gloves are still dirty, I'm just going to pack the outer bearing also. It's the same process, just a smaller bearing. Now we'll take our seal, just kind of set that down, make sure it's as centered as possible. And we'll take something that's sturdy and flat. For instance, we've used upside down hole saws before. Now we have this cap, but I'll just give it a few taps. Then I'll check it, make sure that it's even all the way around. If not, you can always adjust and give it a few more taps. And once that's nice and even, we'll just take our assembly, slide it onto our spindle, and push it until it goes over that lip. We'll take our outer bearing, slide that over our spindle, and then install our washer. Just match the flat side up with the flat side on our spindle, and then our nut. Now we'll go through the process of getting everything seated down. So what you'll want to do is, with your torque wrench and an 1.5" socket, slowly torque down the nut while you're spinning the hub assembly in the opposite direction. I like to do that a couple times just to make sure everything's seated. So I just backed it off, and then I'll do it again. Once everything is seated nice, what we'll do is back our nut off until it's finger tight. We'll take our lock, slide that on, and get it to clamp over the nut. If you're having trouble getting that installed by hand, you can give it some light taps. If you're having to hit it pretty hard, then you'll need to adjust your nut so everything lines up better. We're ready to install our caliper. It's just going to line up with the holes on the back here. Before you try to get it in position, make sure your caliper slides are pushed back out of the way. So once you get it back there, it's kind of hard to get your head back there to see, so you'll just have to go by feel, kind of move it around while you're threading. It should get threaded on. Now we use a 13mm socket to get those tightened and torqued down. Once everything's assembled, we will fill our assembly up with grease. We'll just keep pumping it full of grease until you see it start to kind of flower out of our outer bearing here. That means it's full. Once you have it full of grease, we'll install our caps. Just try to get it pretty centered and then come through with a dead blow. Trying to work around in a circle. It can be pretty tricky depending on the tolerances of it. Keep working around in a circle until it's as flush as it can get and it's even on all sides. So now what we're going to do is kind of situate our actuator. I haven't bolted it down yet. I just wanted to mock it up so that I could find out the best way to run our brake lines. You could drill a hole through here and run it underneath, but I've always found setting these up, especially on a shorter trailer like this, I always have some extra lines, so I routed it up around here. That's also going to avoid having to drill a hole. So I routed it up here, and then this is where our propane is on the other side of this wall. So we'll take a look at it in there. Here's the other side of that wall. As you can see, our line just comes down. I used one of the included clamps to kind of keep it tight against the wall and away from this regulator in case somebody needs to come in here and work with it. But then it just drops down and underneath our trailer. Here's where it comes down by our propane, and then from here I followed our hose and just zip tied to it to keep it nice and tight. And I noticed that we were around some metal, so we don't want this hose getting rubbed against the metal and damaging it. So I just cut some vacuum hose that I had and zip tied it around it to give it an extra layer of protection. And then we continued on past our water pipe here. Once again, double layered with some vacuum hose because I was tying up against this bracket here. Then we continue to follow our other hose until we get to our first junction. So when we set up our junction, I just kind of leave everything loose because I don't know if I'm going to have to rearrange it. It's kind of just tricky to get everything situated properly, so I like to mock it up. But I did have to use a bracket just because I like the junctions to be somewhere sturdy, and I didn't have any frame above it. But our long hose that we fed all the way back ties into our junction. Then we'll have a short hose going straight to our front caliper, a medium length hose going back to another junction back there, which we'll talk about, and our in between the medium and the long hose, which goes over to the other side of the trailer. Now back to our rear junction. There's another short hose going to our rear caliper over here. And one thing that you want to pay attention to when running the hoses to your caliper is that you're not getting too close to your suspension. So that's another reason why I like to mock everything up loose. That way I can make adjustments and get everything tied together correctly. But we have the short hose going to the caliper, and then another long hose going over to the other side. So now all of our fittings will install essentially the same way. You'll see that there's a flare and there's going to be a nut or a fitting. We'll just thread that in by hand until you can't anymore, just to make sure that it's not cross-threading. We'll take a flare wrench. It's going to be a 10 millimeter, and get that tightened down. And with these, I really tighten them down just about as hard as I can with a wrench this long, just because you don't want them to leak. But of course, we'll come back through and check once we have everything filled up that we're not leaking. Now I'll just go through and make sure everything's tightened up, and then from there, I'll make sure I clean up any loose hose that I have, and just double check, make sure nothing's going to interfere with your suspension. So now we're ready to wire up our actuator. It's pretty easy to identify what wires are doing what. White is our ground, yellow will go to our breakaway switch, black is our 12-volt power, and then blue will go to our towed vehicle's brake controller wire. So what I did was I had to extend out these 3 wires because we'll end up grounding in here. I used a duplex for 2 and then a long blue wire. I just used some airline tubing to pull it through into our kingpin where all of our wiring is. And from here we had to identify what wires we need to tap into. So luckily for me, our 7-way is wired properly. So our black wire connects to the black wire coming from our 7-way, that's 12-volt power. This white wire was the yellow wire previously. That was the only extended wire that I had. That connects to the black wire from our breakaway switch. And then the blue wire connects to the blue wire for our 7-way. So now we'll ground out our white wire. I'm just going to crimp on a ring terminal and use this existing ground that we have back here. Back near your battery, there's usually plenty of grounds to go off of, so you can really just choose one. Going for this one because I don't have to extend the wire out at all to get to it. So let's take our screw out. And slide our ring terminal inside of that. We have our ring terminals slid inside of our screw, and we'll just reinstall that right where it came out. Now that we have all of our wiring hooked up and our hoses, we can secure our actuator down with the included self-tappers. Now we're going to bleed all of the air out of the braking system. I have my friend Joe up at our actuator. He's going to fill it up and actuate it. We have kind of our own setup to be able to do that, but you could just pull the breakaway switch to get those brakes running. But one thing you want to know, you want to pay attention to is make sure that there is fluid in the actuator the entire time you're doing it. But we'll start with the farthest caliper from our actuator. And I just have a bottle with some rubber tubing just to prevent any mess. Put that over the bleeder. And with an 11 millimeter wrench, I'll open it up and then tell him to run the actuator. Open! Close! So what we're looking for is, we're looking to just have fluid and no air bubbles. So once we have that accomplished and there's just fluid coming out, we'll move to the next farthest from the actuator and do the same process. Once you have all of the air out of the system, I'd recommend pulling that breakaway switch, letting it hold. Then I go through each wheel, make sure that they're holding nice and tight. And you also want to double check all of your connections for any leaks. So that means where you connected the hose onto the back of the calipers and your junctions, and then also where you connected to the actuator. Now all that's left is to throw your wheels back on, get those torqued down, and take it out for a test drive. You want to dial in your brake controller before you take a long trip. But other than that, that's going to do it for a look at and installation of the DeeMaxx Disc Brakes.